Hi everybody, this is Mark Heaps, a digital imaging enthusiast and author for PSD Tuts. Today I'm going to be doing a review of Mr. Retro's Machine Wash Deluxe filter, a plugin for Photoshop, and it's their upgraded version 2. I've been a big fan of Mr. Retro's filters for a while now. I did a review previously for the site of Retrographer, which was a great filter, and that actually allows you to add some antique or retro effects to graphics. And this filter, Machine Wash Deluxe, is really about adding texture. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a sticker graphic that was drawn by a friend of mine, and this was done in Adobe Illustrator, and I brought it in as a smart object. But very quickly, I managed to turn this into a really textured graphic through Machine Wash Deluxe. So you can see now that looks a lot more like some sort of painted mural on an old worn-out wall in an alley. So I like that look, and I like the convenience of this because it speeds up my workflow. So one of the things that I'm going to do, just to show you a quick little demo, is merge these two layers together as a smart object. And now I'm going to apply the filter. And this is really an exciting thing because not a lot of third-party plugins actually work with smart objects inside of Photoshop. So if I just go to filter here, I downloaded the filter and installed it from the site, and it just shows up here as Mr. Retro Machine Wash Deluxe. The filter itself is free to download, and it comes with a series of textures automatically installed. All of those are free. If you'd like to upgrade and add textures to the plugin, that's where you have to start paying for some of the extra texture packs. So let me go in here and reset my last settings so it goes back to the default. You can see when I pressed that reset all button, I got a little alert here. It's letting me know that I'm going to delete the settings and they cannot be restored. So I've got it back to no settings applied. One of the things that's really exciting about the new version of Machine Wash Deluxe, and in comparison to any of the other filters from Mr. Retro, is that now you can actually scale the UI for your working area. And previously you couldn't do that. So I had some large format graphics and I couldn't drag out, which meant I was forever zooming in and out to see more of the graphic. So now they've made it so that that's scalable, and they've added a series of quick keys to make it more in line with how Photoshop users work. So you can use Command- to zoom out. You can use Command+ to zoom in. Things will snap into place from there. So you can see that zooming out when I'm pressing the key. Or you can just press the buttons down here at the bottom. And then over here on the left, we've got all of these basic settings. So we've got artistic, atmospheric, distressed, etc., etc., etc. And I just want to show you one under the woods category. If I was to scroll down here, we can see something like burnished and boarded, right? Now, remember earlier I mentioned that it comes with a series of free textures. If you're using a preset that has a texture control in it, that's part of a texture pack you don't own, you can just hit this little checkbox here that says Filter Settings, and this will only show textures that you actually have installed. So you can see here down at the bottom, this is changing when I press that checkbox. That's letting me know that I no longer can use some of those settings because I don't have the texture installed from that texture pack. And you can just download the extra textures from their site. It's really, really easy. So if I go in here and I choose that burnished boarded, single click, and I get something that looks pretty cool. My gray background has been turned into this old, sort of worn out textured barnwood. And then my sticker has all these series of patches and wearing on them, which kind of looks like it's blended over the top of the texture. Now, if at any point you're just not sure what you want, you can just go up here and press this auto button. And every time you press it, it's going to randomize a series of settings from the filter with the texture packs and try to generate something randomly for you. So if you want to just have fun, you can just sit here and press that button and get a whole series of different looks. You can also, if you find settings that you do like, and you're playing around with the adjustments, you can also come down here and press Save, and that will allow you to save a user setting. So if I just go ahead and reset all here, remember this resets everything back to normal. And then here's a setting that I saved earlier called Wall Mural. And this is where you'll see that texture and some of that grunge wear on the original sticker design. So now it's actually got a little bit of displacement, it's got some coloring done to it, it's got some textures applied to it, and I really like the look of this. It's fast and it's easy. This saves me a lot of time. If you're wondering how any of it works, you can just go press this manual button and it will take you to the Mr. Retro website, and from there there's a series of instructions and introductions to how the UI and the plugin works. If you want to see a gallery of all the textures and the filters, just simply come up here and press the pre-treat button, and that will take you to a web page where you can choose any of the textures based on category, and then click on the thumbnail to see a large preview, all of them being applied to the same photograph, so you can make a respectable comparison. So now I've reset everything with our graphic, and we want to start looking at the settings and controls of how we're editing the graphic itself. So the way this was explained to me was that there are these three major controllers, and you should think of these kind of like a sandwich. You have wash, surface, and background. And the simplest way of thinking about it is that the wash is what's happening to the surface, right? The surface is the meat in the middle of the sandwich. And the background is what shows through the surface when the wash wears away the surface. So if you had something that was like sandpaper and that was grinding away on a piece of wood and it eventually wore through and created holes, what you would see through the holes would be the background. Make sense? So it's three different layers and approaches to this particular graphic, and that's what makes this so dynamic. If we now jump over to the Wash tab and see this category, you can see a lot of the settings aren't available yet, and this is because you need to choose a texture. So if I go in here and press the Choose button, you can see a library of textures present themselves in a little drawer sort of UI on the left-hand side. Now you can see based on the preview that these are what the textures actually look like. This is sort of a black and white mask preview of that texture. And you'll see some of my texture thumbnails say low resolution demo and has a little blue arrow on them. This basically means that I still need to download the high-res version of this texture. I don't own it. So if I choose this as a texture and I try to apply that setting, it's going to give me a warning letting me know that this is a low resolution demo. So if I want to filter by texture packs that I've purchased, I can go in here and choose texture set 1, texture set 2, 3, 4, etc. So if you know you've bought one particular texture set, you can filter by that. And then you can also go over here to the effect and choose what kind of texture effect you're looking for. Me, I might be looking for woods. So now I can see the textures that I have in texture set 1 that are also categorized as wood. When I've got that, I can simply click on one of these, and then that gets applied to my graphic over here on the right. If you want to see a preview with the thumbnail of how your graphic would look, you just press this little eyeball down here, and that shows you what the texture is doing to the actual graphic in the thumbnail. And now that I see that, I kind of like the way the barnwood looks, so I'm just going to choose that. When you're happy with this, you can go ahead and press apply, and it applies it back to the preview graphic while you're still in the plugin. So in here, now that we've chosen a texture, you have a series of controls. You could flip the orientation of the texture. You could invert it if you wanted to flip the mask. You could rotate it, so now my grain will go vertically. So again, you have a whole series of controls that make this a little bit more than just a library being applied. You really have a dynamic sense of control over that texture mask. You also have the scale of the texture or the intensity. Down here, you can see the type of erosion or wash that you're applying with. So you have erosion, stain. Now you can see the stain is applying this color here. So if I was to choose a different color, it would then apply that. You can also choose bleach. This is similar to screen, I think, inside of Photoshop as a blending mode. Again, I'll change that back to black for a second. You see it doesn't show anything. Black doesn't apply with screen. So it's that same sort of concept and how that works within Photoshop. From here, we can also choose color, and that's similar to the color blend mode concept. Not exactly the same. And we go back to erosion up here. Okay. Now the erosion is giving us this texture washing out so that we can see other elements coming from some of the other categories. Now down here below, you can also choose the type of coverage and the wash edge. So the coverage, whether you want soft or hard, you can see there as I soften that up, we're getting this sort of softer mask array in here. The coverage scale, how large or small do we want that coverage to be? You can also choose random. I find this kind of similar to the idea of render clouds in Photoshop. There's sort of this soft mask array that's happening. It's sort of a Gaussian algorithm going on there. And then you have the distances. So let me just go ahead and reset this. And then here at the wash edge, you've got a distance controller, which you can see is pulling the texture in from the edge here. And it's square like this because of a select all form of shape. But you could also start with a lasso selection or any type of freeform selection. And then how soft you'd like that edge to be. And that's sort of giving a feathered effect. So if you don't want the texture to be completely applied in a square format, you could mix and match these sliders. So if I move this down to soft, you can see it starts clouding that out. Just little amounts. We can also choose our scale. And then our edge distance, so I can push that back out a little bit. And if you want to be able to control the offset, simply go in here and move this sphere controller around, and then you can adapt where that's being positioned within the UI and within the graphic. So you have a lot of controls in here about how this first wash texture is being applied. If you wanted to add multiple washes, you could simply go up here and choose to add wash. And now you could have a whole second set of controls between wash 1 and wash 2. If you're happy with everything that's been added, then you're going to want to look at the composite here so you can see what both look like mixed together. If I click on wash 1, we're only seeing the first wash that we generated. Wash 2 is our second here. We can also look back at our original and a composite of the two washes on top of each other. So again, a lot of controls in the ability to build dynamic textures within your graphics. And if you're not happy with anything, instead of resetting all of the settings, maybe you've done something custom in surface and background, but you really just want to reset the wash. Over here in the top right, where it said reset all earlier, it's now saying reset wash. So it's only going to set the wash values back to the original setting. So before I show these all mixed together, I've gone ahead and reset my wash back to the default. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Surface tab. If I click on the Surface tab, you can see here again, a lot of the controls are not available until I choose a texture. So let's go ahead and just press the choose button. Here's those categories we talked about earlier. I'm going to go ahead and use barnwood again. And you can see that this is now the surface texture in the middle of the sandwich in that concept, right? And so the texture has been applied. We can see the preview again. I'm going to go ahead and press apply. And now we can see how the graphic is blending with the texture that's been provided from the library. Now, some of the things that you can do in here is, again, you can scale the texture, and you can also choose the depth of the texture. We have those manual controls again, where you can flip the orientation or rotate them. You can also reduce the depth here. One of the things that I really like is this button called Depth Perspective. And when I choose this, you can see it actually takes what is sort of like a bump map and is taking the lines and wrapping them around the texture elements. So this is a nice little detail for realism when you're trying to mix components between your graphic and the texture provided by Machine Wash. You can also see in here, we have the ability to change the color type. So right now it says custom, but if I was to go in here and choose, we have another library all based on a series of tones like color tones or moods like cool, dark, etc., pastels. You also have atmospheric tones, leather tones, metal tones, and down here at the bottom, wood tones. So I could look at some of these, like English chestnut, pick that, and it retones the graphic for me. Press apply. And now you're seeing how some of these different colors and controllers are being applied to the texture and the graphic together. You can also choose the color type, which is tint right now. But let's take a look at these. Colorize is giving us a little bit more of a harsh contrast with this particular setting. We also have boost, which is pushing that blend slightly differently again. Enhance, that's giving us our saturation back. And vivid, and that's giving us a little bit more of the vibrance and saturation and contrast all together. So you can see this concept works very, very similar to blend modes in Photoshop as well. And if you wanted to adjust any of those colors from the setting, you can simply click on the color swatch here. That brings up your standard color picker from Photoshop. You can pick a slightly different tone, press OK, and it will adjust accordingly for that. From here, for your surface texture, you can also choose where you'd like your lighting position. So instead of on the top right like I have it now, I may want to move this over to the upper left. And you can see now the shadows and things have changed, the contrast have readjusted based on where the light position is on this sphere. You also have controllers over your brightness and your contrast. So again, this is definitely not your simple just click and get a magic effect, but with this range of controls, you can be ensured that any effects that you produce aren't going to look like anyone else's that own this particular filter, and that's important to me. Down here at the bottom, we have a series of user settings for colors. for the surface. And now I want to show you what it looks like if we mix these together. So if I go back to our wash, remember I reset this earlier, I'm going to go ahead and press choose again, and I'll go back and choose that barnwood that I saw earlier. So now you're seeing that grit from the wash mixed with the surface texture. And you'll notice that a little message just popped up. It said, would you like to link and apply the same settings to this texture? Should it be the same as the wash tab settings or same as the surface tab settings? And I'm going to go ahead and say same as surface tab settings because I really want this wash effect to be based on the texture I chose for the surface. So I'm going to press yes, and that's how it's been applied. So our last tab here is the background tab. And what this is going to allow us to do is to pick a texture that on any of the high edge parts of the surface texture that have been worn away by the wash, we're going to allow the background to show through those parts. So if we go over here to our background button, you can see I have nothing applied right now. Again, there's a large library of user settings that have been provided for you. And there's also this little thumbnail window that allows you to scroll through and just pick some of the textures straight from here. These also have color settings pre-applied. So you could just try one of these out. And you can see those textures are now loading through the part of the high edge of the surface texture that's been worn away from the wash. So this one apparently is called boilerplate. But if you wanted to go through and not use a preset from up here, you could just press the choose button, go in here and pick from a texture set. Maybe I'll try texture set 2. And instead of woods this time around, maybe I'll try something like weathered or aged. So I could now pick something like bad varnish. And that's now stained in to the texture and showing through where the wash has worn it away. So if I press apply, I really like how that looks as a texture. I like how that's showing through in the background. But if I wanted to scale it or enhance it in any way, I have those controls again as well. You also have the orientation controls that we've shown in each of the tabs. We also have the ability to fill canvas in case you wanted to go larger than your graphic. And we also have the ability to enhance. And you can see here, that just sort of smooths in and blends some of the reaction from the background through the surface. Now we can also choose custom color packs again. Right now it says custom, but if I wanted to go with like a light oak, you can see that brings in those yellow hues from where the wash has worn away the surface and the background is showing through. I think I liked it more with the amber hues though, so I'm going to try this walnut stained oak. That matches the sticker much better, makes it a little bit more monochromatic and kind of sticks with those reds. And from here, I can also adjust the custom colors again. So you have this really diverse range of controls at every stage. Now, if I wanted to, I could still go back to my wash and say, you know what, this is just not worn out enough. I want to add a second wash to this. So I'm going to go ahead and choose add wash. Maybe I'll pick this one here that's called general store. I kind of like the grain going vertically, but you know, my other texture doesn't go vertical either. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate that so that it moves the same direction. And now if I go back and look at my composite, I can see how those look together. So wash 1, wash 2, composite. And if I wasn't happy with that in any way, I could just press this little red X and that would go away. But I like how my wash 2 has these green textures. So just take a look at these right here and lock in on those. If I go back to my composite, you're going to see these green textures and lines staying with us from the wash. And there they are, still in there. So this is giving me a really organic looking texture, a lot of control, and I'm really happy with this. So now that I am happy with this, one thing that's worth pointing out as well, just as a part of your workflow, is that when you're inside of wash, surface, or background, there is also a checkbox down here that allows you to generate a wash effect inside of a mask layer, or under surface, you can generate the effect in a new layer above. And same again for background, generate background in new layer below. So you can see how it would separate all of the composited elements out of the graphic. Now, I mentioned a few of the different settings earlier. Now that I'm looking at it, I really wish I could go back to that wash tab and start seeing how the coverage of wash 1 is actually working. I realize this texture is starting to show up pretty harsh in the way that it's blending with everything. So I'm just going to go back here to this feature of coverage and soften that up a little bit. Just pulling some of the edging out from the texture itself here in wash. Kind of gets these really nice cloud patterns again. And then maybe reducing that distance and then softening it up with a little bit of feather. So now this starts looking a little bit more believable in the way the texture is blending with the graphic. I can click on my composite. And now I like that texture much, much more. It's much more believable to me. And I'm getting to see the wash number 2 show up much better. So once I'm happy with this, if I want to, I could save it as a user setting. But I'm just going to go ahead and press OK and show this back in Photoshop. So there's my graphic from Machine Wash Deluxe version 2 by Mr. Retro applied to my smart object. Pretty cool. Lots of control, great effects, and I'm very, very happy with it. Hope you guys like it too and have fun playing with this exciting free filter.